Hello, I'm Jason Bahr.
And I'm Rebecca Bahr.
This video is a part of a series telling the stories of the descendants of Ernest Bahr.
In this video, we will tell the tragic story of Floyd Bahr and Clement Mead, members of our family who were murdered during a robbery in November 1922.
Floyd Bahr was born on August 31st, 1912. He was the first Bahr born in Kansas City, and the first child of Earl and Margaret Bahr. Earl had moved from Huntington, Indiana to Kansas City as a boy, with his parents Albert and Lydia Bahr, and his two sisters Lila and Nora. Clement Mead was born in 1883. His father was a policeman, and his mother was a homemaker. He had an older sister, Mary. As a teenager, he worked as a day laborer, and later got a job as a clerk in a railroad office. Clement Mead married Nora Bahr in March of 1906, and the two of them ran a small grocery store on Central Avenue in Kansas City, Kansas. In the fall of 1922, Floyd Bahr was 10 years old and was in the 5th grade at Prescott School. His sister Florence was 7, his sister Mildred was 5, his brother Milton was 14 months old. Lawrence Elbert Bahr, the final sibling in this generation, was yet to be born. Late in October 1922, Harry Davis, 21, was out of work. He had lost his job as a cook 3 months ago, and his savings was dwindling fast. He lived at a rooming house at Missouri and Grand, run by Johnny Walsh, a small-time politician. One night he went to a pool hall at 508 Main Street, where he met Carl Fredrickson, known to him as Brownie. Fredrickson had several aliases. The two played pool, and Brownie told Davis he had a way for him to make some easy money. If Harry would join Brownie in some hold-up jobs, he would get a share of the loot. Harry Davis agreed. At the same time, Lyle Hughes, 20, was working for Mike Kerwin as a taxi driver. Hughes also lived in the same rooming house. Lyle Hughes was born Lyle Baum, but he lost his parents early in life. He was taken in by his aunt and uncle and used their name, Hughes. The taxi stand where Lyle worked was at 7th and Walnut in Kansas City, Missouri. Hughes was a problem child, and his student years were marked by truancy, disorder, and disobedience. Twice he was sent to McCoon Home for Boys, the second time on a police charge. Kerwin and Hughes had an arrangement with Brownie. Kerwin, the owner of the taxi stand, would provide cars to be used in robberies in exchange for a share of the take. Lyle Hughes, the taxi driver, would be the driver for the crimes. The car would then be left at 8th and McGee to be picked up by Kerwin later. Harry Davis and a 5th member of the gang, James Hudson Jr., 19, would join as hold-up men. Hudson was the son of a wealthy oil man from Iowa, Kansas. He worked as a letter carrier, but was arrested for stealing checks. He served 2 years in prison. Hudson, Hughes, and Davis all lived at the rooming house at Missouri and Grand, just a stone's throw away from the courthouse and the county jail. The gang set to work terrorizing the two Kansas cities. On November 4th, they robbed the New Center restaurant on Grand Avenue. On November 10th, they robbed the Supreme Lunch on Main Street. November 14th, the Wyco grocery store on 12th. November 15th, Sam's Lunch in Westport. November 17th, they robbed a Dr. Langsdale at 33rd and Prospect. November 19th, Beecher Heights Pharmacy, the Art Theater, and held up a car full of people. On November 21st, the gang hit a new low. Brownie and Hudson, with Hughes driving, robbed the Independence Avenue Pharmacy of Connolly Marshall, 62. Brownie and Hudson told Marshall to raise his hands, but he refused. Instead, he went to the back, trying to retrieve a revolver. Marshall had thwarted a robbery in his pharmacy 9 years ago when 3 bandits came in. He was able to shoot one of them and stop the robbery. But this night, Brownie and Hudson followed him and shot him in the chest, killing him. It was the first murder committed by the gang. After the murder, the crime spree continued with more robberies. A man robbed at gunpoint, a taxi robbed, a drugstore, another pharmacy, another man shot. But the worst was yet to come. Around 7:30 on Wednesday, November 29th, 1922, the night before Thanksgiving, Harry Davis phoned Mike Kerwin to tell him that Larry Hughes was to see him. Kerwin drove to meet them in his car, and Hughes asked if the gang could use the car for the night. Together they planned to hold up several grocery stores in Kansas City, Kansas. Hughes, with Brownie and Davis, drove over the state line and went to 14th and Central. Their first target was the grocery store of Harry Hartung at 1400 Central Avenue. That night, Floyd Bahr was visiting his grandparents, who lived at 38th South 15th Street. Grandmother Lydia was preparing for the next day's Thanksgiving meal and asked Floyd to run to the store owned by his aunt and uncle to get pumpkin spice. The Mead store was about a 5-minute walk away at 1407 Central Avenue. Clement Mead and his wife Nora were both tending the store that night. It was a clear night and relatively warm for November, 55 degrees. The gang of bandits arrived on Central Avenue around 9 p.m. As Hughes and Brownie waited in the car, Davis entered Hartung's store, which was across the street from Clement Mead's store. Davis waited around the store about 5 minutes, bought some apples, and left.
Hartung, the store's owner, also worked as a driver on the police force and believes Davis was waiting to rob the store. But there were too many customers. Davis reported back to Hughes and Brownie in the car about the crowded store. They decided to rob the store across the street instead. The store Floyd walked to from his grandparents' house, the store owned by Clement Mead. Davis entered the grocery store of Clement Mead around 9:30 p.m. Floyd Bahr was already there, getting the pumpkin spice for his grandmother and visiting his aunt and uncle. Davis asked Mrs. Nora Mead for an apple. About 5 minutes later, Brownie entered the store and asked for some ham. Clement Mead led Brownie to the back of the store to retrieve the ham. While there, Brownie pulled a gun on Mead and struck him in his back. Harry Davis dropped a dime on the floor and Nora Mead and Davis were looking for it. When Mrs. Mead looked up, she saw Brownie pointing a revolver at Clement Mead. She screamed and Brownie shot in her direction. Clement Mead went to help his wife and was shot 2 or 3 times by Davis. Clement Mead, 39 years old, died almost instantly. The bullet Brownie fired at the woman hit Floyd Bahr, who was protecting her. Brownie and Davis made off with $250 in cash. The bandits fled the scene, and about 20 minutes later robbed a drugstore on 5th and Washington in Kansas City, Kansas, shooting and wounding Bragg Getty as they left. The 3 then drove to Kansas City, Missouri, and continued to drive around, pondering their next move. The total carnage in the month-long crime spree for the gang consisted of 2 non-fatal shootings, 3 murders, and 24 robberies. As the gang decided what to do next, Hughes, the driver, became distracted and ran into a ditch. Hughes called a tow truck to pull them out, and the 3 waited for an hour for the truck to arrive. They decided to drive to Union Station to take the next train to St. Joseph, Missouri. When they got to the station, Brownie went inside, while Davis and Hughes, armed with revolvers, waited in the car. The car used in the robberies had been described by many witnesses. It was distinctive because the car had white wooden wheels, an unusual feature for the day. The plan to use the car from Kerwin's taxi stand was the undoing of the group. As Davis and Hughes waited in the car, they were spotted by 2 motorcycle patrolmen, H.M. Wyatt and O.B. Flattery. The 2 officers noticed the white wooden wheels. They came up to the car quietly before Davis and Hughes knew they were there. This surreptitious approach likely saved their lives. "It was a good thing I did not know you birds were looking for us, because I'd just as soon have bumped you off as not," Davis told Flattery and Wyatt later at police headquarters. "A couple of more wouldn't have mattered much." Brownie, looking out from the train station, saw the 2 police officers at the car. He bought his ticket and boarded a train, leaving Hughes and Davis behind.
Floyd, wounded badly, was taken to Bethany Hospital. The next day his mother Margaret tried to comfort him. "Am I going to die, Mother?" Floyd would frequently ask. "No, no, dear. You'll come out all right." "I don't wish to die," Floyd said. And it's Thanksgiving, too. Floyd Bahr died late in the afternoon on Thanksgiving Day, November 30th, 1922. He was only 10 years old. Davis and Hughes, wanted on both sides of the state line, but apprehended in Missouri, confessed to their crimes and agreed to plead guilty to 3 first-degree counts of robbery. They made their pleas on Friday, December 1st, and were sentenced to 75 years in prison. The Bahr family was relieved not to have to go through the ordeal of a trial. Kerwin, the taxi stand owner, was arrested when implicated by Davis and Hughes during their confession. However, there was insufficient evidence to hold him, and he was set free. Brownie and Hudson were arrested in Savannah, Georgia, when Hudson's new wife tried to pawn a fur coat stolen during the crime spree. Hudson claimed that the coat was won from Brownie during a card game. Although both men were extradited back to Kansas City, here our research loses track of Brownie. Hudson was returned to Kansas City on Christmas Day, 1922. His father, the wealthy oil operator, hired an array of legal talent to defend him. The father claims the boy was suffering from a blood clot on the brain caused by a childhood injury. When he was 8 years old, Hudson was thrown from a horse-drawn buggy and severely hurt his head. He had an operation when he was 14 to relieve the swelling in his brain.
As the police investigated Hudson's alleged crimes, they found an array of witnesses from multiple crime scenes who could positively identify Hudson as the perpetrator and which corroborated the confessions of Hughes and Davis. In the county jail, Hudson became very ill and was moved to the general hospital. It was thought he tried to commit suicide by poisoning himself with mercury. Another theory was that he was faking his condition in order to mount an insanity defense.
His condition grew worse, and on February 7th, 1923, Hudson died. An autopsy was performed, and it was determined indeed he had died from inflammation of the brain from the childhood accident. Floyd and Clement now rest in the family plot in Highland Park Cemetery. The following is an abridged version of an article that appeared in the Kansas City Kansan on December 1st, 1922.
A dog. No particular kind of dog, but just one of those little dogs that has close affinity with small boyhood. Lay outside the big door at Bethany Hospital all day yesterday and last night.
Late last night, Stanley Beatty, city detective, went to the hospital. "What's the trouble, little fellow?" asked Beatty. "Waiting for someone?" Beatty stopped to pat the little head. "We'll find out about it, old chap," Beatty said as he went towards the hospital door. Just inside the hospital, a nurse stopped the detective to say a sympathetic word about Floyd Bahr, the little boy who had died in the late afternoon after being shot by a bandit. "That's what the little dog is doing out there," the detective told the nurse, who had recalled that the dog had come to the hospital door soon after the boy had been carried in, and it had since remained posted there. A few minutes later, the detective left the hospital and stopped to take the dog into his arms. Tears were in his eyes as he patted the little head. "Too bad, old fellow. Your little pal is gone and cannot play with you anymore," he whispered. The dog went on his way, soaring over the same little form that lay so still and white, just beyond the great doors of the hospital. Just a chance and a recent friend of Floyd, a member of the grief-stricken household of the boy, said today. He was always making friends like that and loved dogs. They loved him too. This video is dedicated to the memories of Floyd Bahr and Clement Mead, and all our cherished loved ones who have passed away.